Welcome to 160 Studios. I'm Holly Scott. Today I have with me Dr. Sarah Matt. She is a surgeon turned health tech strategist. She's also the author of The Borderless Healthcare Revolution. She's held leadership roles at Oracle, Savado, NextGen, and multiple health tech startups, bringing over 2 decades of experience at the intersection of medicine and innovation. Her work focuses on leveraging digital tools to expand access and reimagine healthcare delivery worldwide. I'm thrilled to have Sarah with us today. Thanks for joining today, Sarah.
Of course. Thanks, Holly, for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before we jump into the book, because I'm excited to get there, we first must know a little bit about your career path, because it's quite interesting to have someone who practiced medicine, move into industry, and then become a writer as well. So tell us a little bit about what got you into medicine and then where things started changing for you.
Sure. So I think I always wanted to be a doctor since I was a little kid. And all of us type A personalities, we all go into procedural areas. And so, of course, I became a surgeon. But the team mentality of burns was really attractive to me. It was very impactful. The patients are in a very vulnerable state, and it's our absolute privilege and pleasure to do it. Um, but I felt limited. So when I was at the bedside as a surgeon, you can only see maybe 20 or 40 people on a very, very busy day. And I thought I could do more. I thought I could make a bigger impact and touch hundreds, thousands, or millions of people every day. And so doctors are pretty much the dumbest smart people you'll ever meet. And I had to kind of retool myself. So went to UT Austin, got my MBA, and made my transition to the tech sector. So I started off in next gen healthcare back when they had an acute division and cut my teeth in product and strategy and moved from there. So I have been at all the different electronic medical record places people love to hate. I've been at several startups and I was at Oracle for quite some time. I built out their cloud business for healthcare and life sciences around the globe. And then I got to be a part of the Cerner acquisition, which was their largest at $29 billion. So a very exciting acquisition and bringing people, product, and process together.
Yeah, that I would say that was, the EHR revolution was essentially the cowboy of digital, as you and I've been in the industry a little bit longer, but I can remember seeing the infancy of it and the growth being initially, as most
Mhm.
cowboys are, balked and, and really thwarted. But then once they started realizing, or once there started to be some adoption curve going on, it actually did start working out to be beneficial to clinicians, payers, providers, and such. So when you that first say 5, 10 years, 5-ish years maybe, let's start there in industry, what value were they bringing to the organization as a clinician that you were hired to be the expert in?
So that first 6 months I was there, I was really an SME on what it's like to be a doctor in a hospital. And I had lots of expertise there,
Hmm.
but I really was only there for maybe 6 months when they asked me to run all of product for their division. And so I got into product the really hard way, trial by fire,
Hmm.
lots of angry customers. Critical access hospitals were our main customer at that time, lots of regulations, and a lot of, I'd say, pushback, just like you mentioned, with the friction of digital kind of pushing through there, but also a lot coming from the federal government in terms of carrots and sticks for what was necessary. So, not FDA at the time, but everything else.
And we see it in industry with, say, early adopters and the laggards, and then of course the people that actually drive it, and all of a sudden there's the upswing of adoption. Was there a moment that you recall being in the industry that was really the gasoline on the fire for EHS and employee health and the EHR systems overall? Was there a point in time when the kind of that perfect wave, that perfect setup allowed for this to be more of a welcome tool than prior?
So, I'd suggest that we may not even be there yet. I'd say that the EMR space
Mhm.
was heavily impacted from a usability perspective by all of the different regulatory programs, meaningful use, MIPS and MACRA. And these were government pushes that essentially incentivized hospital systems to go digital. But it also made it so that technology vendors had to push functionality in at such a fast rate that they were desperately trying to attest that they had these features, which meant that they didn't have the time to make it delightful, to make it really usable for patients and providers. So I'd say that today it's, 2025 and we still have usability issues. We're seeing AI come in more and more from an ambient listening perspective or transcription, doing more automation, which is definitely helping, but it's all built on old systems that have had to really be fixed as opposed to doing something amazing. I think for me, the biggest transition that has really shaped healthcare in many ways that I think is important is really the boost to cloud. So when I was building out our OCI business, um, for healthcare and life sciences at Oracle, I think that the move to cloud allowed folks to not just integrate information, but to truly utilize the data that they had in different ways and understand that they had access to more. And they were then trying to solve those problems. How could we connect things better? How could we make this more agnostic? And how could we use data for the benefit of patients and providers and systems?
That is interesting. And I assume at that point you didn't have the storage issues that you had up until that point. You had a finite access, you had finite storage, you had to work through it. And then I'm just thinking from more of a novice user, from a personal level, that once you have access to the cloud, it becomes limitless, at least perceptionally speaking.
Exactly. I think it made it so that those silos theoretically had a way to be broken down.
Mm.
Before that, it was just like bringing in extra pipes. There's only so many you can bring in.
Mm-hmm.
But once we moved to cloud, the possibilities grew. And I think that's where you've seen over the years more platform organizations come to be. And again, those point solutions now must be able to work on a platform that integrates with everything else. So I really think that as we move forward, we're seeing folks kind of consider where are all the different products and solutions I have for my organization, whether they're a tech startup or an electronic medical record company. Everyone needs to work with hospitals. How can we make sure we can do that in the best fashion possible? And what does that mean from an infrastructure and platform perspective?
Fascinating. Big, big, big challenge there for sure. There's a lot
Exactly.
of things to unpack. I do want to know what prompted the interest in writing the book, but before we jump there, just based on your career to date, where do you feel you've had the most fulfillment as a leader? Where have you had? I use the word fun from a fulfillment perspective, right? The hard day work is often where you feel the most fulfillment. It couldn't necessarily, it may not be the most enjoyment you get, but perhaps that you felt that you did something meaningful. I'm curious because you've done a lot of really interesting things.
So I've built a lot of things from the ground up, but I think that the most interesting and exciting was post our acquisition of Cerner, and I was in charge of our post-close diligence from a product perspective. And so digging into that entire Cerner portfolio and really making the recommendations about how we could move forward, where we should invest, where we shouldn't, that was a very valuable time. And it was exciting to be able to really dig under the hood from an objective perspective. I like that a lot.
Wow, with the size of that acquisition, that's no easy feat. Was that months, weeks, years?
It's
How
many
long of
months.
a process was that integration?
Yeah, it was, so I'd say that the diligence portion, it started pre-close, of course, and then, post-close, we had to continue that. But I'd say that the integration will continue for a long time. Um, they've made huge strides, and as we built out the next versions of what the EMR could be, brought in various, I'd say, platform level services from Oracle, building the backside of everything into a new fashion with improved performance, data curation and management. And now you'll see all the different pieces of AI, voice, et cetera, coming through. I think that it's concurrently a fixing of the old, but also an evolution to the new. And so it's hard to say, have we integrated or not? Of course we have. But at the same time, everything's moving forward at the same time. So it's hard to say where that begins and ends.
Interesting. Yeah, so it's quite fluid. Yeah. I could see it really doesn't ever come to a conclusion where it's like, okay, we're done now. On to the next
Exactly.
project. Wow. So health tech leader, a strong clinical background. What brought you to this book?
Well, it's interesting. There's been so much exciting work going on in the tech sector. Last year, I moved to Sabato, startup in the device space, working on remote robotic surgery enablement. And a real theme kind of emerged in the work that I've done. It's always been geared towards improving access. I ran patient engagement for NextGen for a long time, bringing the cloud all over the world to ministries of health and big pharma and payers, et cetera, was a big push when I was at Oracle. And I appreciated the mission of Sabato in enabling robotic surgery as well. And so what I've recognized over the course of this time is that the technology is the easy part. And we focus so much on it that it becomes the center of all our discussion. But when we really think about it, there's barriers to that adoption, of that implementation, and of bringing people on board and actually getting the care they need, bringing their startups and businesses forward that are really important. And so for me, it was really about really talking to the builders. Hey, how can you succeed? We haven't been building access from the start, and that's part of why your startup's not blown out of the water. This is why you can't get into this new market. But then also talking to the delivery systems. Hey, where are you missing the mark? Why are you losing patients? What are the no shows all about? How could you connect with people better? We are in such an interesting time where retention of employees, nurses are a great example, is so difficult. How can we do more at a high quality level with less and impact more people um, by doing things a little bit differently?
Interesting. So the title is The Borderless Healthcare Revolution. Before we dive further into what went into this, give us just a general sense. What does this mean? What is this book about?
It's about decreasing barriers. And it's easy to think about a geographic border. So, whether you're one country or the next in the EU, one state or the next in the United States, a lot of people think about those kinds of borders. But what I'd suggest is that there's borders and barriers in everything from digital literacy to financial borders. When we think about the ability for a surgery center to buy a large soft tissue robot, that's a big deal. If we think about them maybe going with a smaller profile, what's the cost there? Can they access that technology in a better fashion? Um, and which patients can then have access to those things? We have lots of interesting ways that we have, I'd say, in the medical field, treated large populations in the United States in not the best ways in our history. And so there's culture barriers, there's generational traumas, of course. And so gaining the trust of patients to sign up for the next trial or to actually adhere to a treatment plan are difficult. And it may not be because the science is not there. It may not be because the tech is not amazing. It may be for those other reasons, those borders, those walls that have been put up.
Mm. And those borders can be, just for macro audience understanding, it could be as simple as your zip code. You may be 2 miles away outside of care coverage for a particular treatment that may be much more advanced than what you might get in a slightly more rural area. And it could be, like you said, it could be the clinician's preference. It could be a stigma that they see when they come in and treat a certain patient population. There's borders that come in various designs, colors, sizes, and such. So it's a lot to tackle. So where did you start? So you said, okay, I'm going to start with this lofty topic. As an author, what was first for you?
So I thought all about the people I've talked to over the years, my clients, my patients. I still practice charity care medicine here in upstate New York. And I really was thinking about the stories. I said, well, where are the stories and how can this help folks as they're considering access really internalize and understand those things, not just like a textbook, but as something that will tug those heartstrings and get us to remember. And so I thought about the stories. And then I also thought about what is access? And I think there's a lot of different definitions. And so I really produced a framework around the 5 pillars of access. So geographical, financial, cultural, digital, and trust and knowledge. And then when you really break those things apart, every story makes sense. When you think about any patient or even a business on why they haven't been able to get past something to be compliant, to be able to access a medication, a service, you name it, all of a sudden, if you look through those 5 pillars, there are reasons. And then if you considered how those could be fixed, well, then a lot more is possible.
Starts with awareness and a process in order to address it. Wow, that's really insightful. So you had a number of interviews. I understand you interviewed a number of
Yes.
individuals. Tell us about the diversity of the interviews. Who did you chat with, and what did you find out?
Well, I didn't want this to just be a bunch of, delivery system CEOs talking about one part of the business.
Hmm.
So I talked to physicians in rural communities. I talked to physicians that were military physicians that were now veterans. So I talked to actual patients. And it was interesting trying to find the right stories to exemplify what we were talking about, but also I just talked to so many amazing people. So everything from, the advances in AI to robotic surgery to primary care access were all very interesting. There's so much that I learned about refugee medicine as an example. And so I really looked for a different group of people that may not have been spoken to before because it wasn't just one group, it was a very varied group. People that had experiences with mental health care, with primary care, with all these different pieces, so that it could really touch all the bases in this first book.
Hmm. Interesting. So, what was the biggest surprise to you as you started weaving these conversations together and thinking about your, call them 5 pillars of healthcare access?
I think I knew this before, but what became very clear is that the technology's there. Technology is the easy part. When I was working at Oracle, Larry Ellison used to say this oftentimes in some of our meetings. He said, "Oh, the technology is easy. You got this, guys. Like, get it done."
Hmm.
And at the time, I would laugh because it seemed really hard at the time. But now, listening to these stories and listening to the examples of tech companies doing amazing work and still failing, of patients doing everything they can and still failing, of providers and health systems doing the best they can and still failing, it wasn't because of the tech, it was because of other reasons. And I think that this interview process in particular allowed me to see that in lots of different ways and then back it up with the research.
Mm. So if the fabric of the book, if the intention is to bring awareness to providers, payers, perhaps delivery systems, clinicians, patients, anyone interested in startups, right, innovators. Um, once we have the awareness, are there actionable takeaways that you could share?
Absolutely. So there's so many books out there that are really just fluffy theory, and you can get them in the airport every time that you're through. But I wanted this to be something where you could pick up the book, read a chapter, and have something you could do right away. And so every chapter has a checklist for delivery systems, and everyone from a board member down to a community care worker or to a lead nurse on a floor has something they could do right then and there to improve access based on that chapter. And I also, I've been a builder my entire career, and product management is all about trying to figure out what should be built next and why. And I brought that to the book too, is what should builders do? How can they build access from the get-go, which will improve their ability to scale the new markets, which will allow them to access new users and new segments, which will allow them to make those excellent architectural decisions at the beginning so they don't dev themselves into a corner.
Mm.
And so every chapter also has how those builders can consider those concepts around access and make themselves more successful right now.
The access is so critical. We could think of it as that last mile, right, between any product. And from where I sit, We work with young companies, emerging technology companies, product or service companies, and their market is healthcare. It's
Mhm.
either clinicians, patients, or a combination thereof, or payers, or all of the above. And one of the biggest blind spots that we see early on is the inability to really think about what that last mile is going to look like when you really do have that impact, and how is it going to be, how are you going to work it upstream so that you don't spend a lot of time and money running down one road to hit a wall, to turn around and come back and running down another road. So your framework, I love the simplicity of the 5 points, because if you can identify early, it all every problem solved starts with awareness. So if we identify early what those potential problems could be, building in that mechanism early, that feedback loop, and those conversations to ensure you're staying close to what really is going to be most effective as early as possible, could be incredibly beneficial.
That, I've made tons of mistake over my career. And part of that is you don't always get to build from scratch. You're working from a platform that has been, built for the last 2 months, 2 years, 2 decades, and you have to do something new. I remember going into some areas where we're like, oh, we need to go hit the Asian market, but we couldn't write anything in 2 byte. So now what could we do? Well, it was going to take 3 years to get us there. Should we just scrap the whole thing and start over? And again, these are those crazy decisions you have to make from a tech perspective. If I write everything in if I write everything in a way that's only going to work in English, that's only going to work in the United States, that's wonderful. It's a really big market right now.
Mm.
And I think that folks are told we need segmentation, we need differentiation, and you absolutely do. But our markets are moving so fast that your long-term market where you're actually going to make your money post commercialization may be different than your first market where you're going to cut your teeth, make a ton of mistakes, and actually have that smaller area where you can be successful and drive it through. I see a lot of folks are like, oh, we're going to hit the US first. And I don't know that it's always the best idea. Um, why not go to Singapore? Why not go to Malaysia? Why not? And
Mhm.
I think that those discussions and thoughts are not actually built out because there's the assumption that, oh, well, my team's here, it should be easier here. Well, maybe you should think about what borders are in your mindset right now that are preventing you from considering markets that are actually going to be better for your launch and then markets that are going to be better for your long term commercialization.
Mhm. Yeah, we're seeing a bit of that shift again in the startup sector, innovative medical devices. For many years, it was really US or bust. Companies would
Mhm.
start outside the US, but the market was the US, and it was insane to think that you weren't going to consider the US in your plans. And I'm not saying we're falling that far from grace. It's still a significant
Yeah,
market, but the
it really is.
reality is there are companies that are quite successful and really don't have the US even in the top 5 in terms of priorities, because they are doing a better job connecting the dots between what they have and where it can best be served and utilized. And we do have a lot of both headwinds and tailwinds right now in our system that can make, depending on the technology, either challenging or opportunistic. So I think that thinking through that as you develop your market model could be one of the strongest points of advice for the young startup companies, which is again where we play most.
I'd agree. And I
Mhm.
think that even for US based startups, if you're building in San Jose, great. Are you getting enough market information if you're going to launch in Alabama? If you're going to launch in Tennessee? Not everyone that is testing your device, your software or digital therapeutic is you. And so when you think about your actual user, your actual buyer, you really have to make sure you're going to understand that persona properly. And that might be going into that community and finding champions and local folks that can be the ones that can be your voice to get the information that you need.
Mm. Absolutely. From the tech sector itself, through your interviews, through your experiences, here we are, 2025. What do you see? And let's start U.S. and then we can think bigger picture. But in terms of democratizing healthcare, what do you think our our greatest headwinds and tailwinds are right now?
So there's so many to think about. But when I think about headwinds, there's lots of federal pressure and state pressure to do certain things a certain way. And everything from the process for the FDA to state specific reimbursement is changing on a regular basis. And I think that it's a headwind because folks, especially in the health tech market, have been used to a long process where it's going to take us several years to do the FDA push. Oh, it's several years before the next regulation will come out. Now we have to be more nimble. And so if your regulatory team or your compliance team is of the mindset of, well, we'll deal with that next year, you're going to be awfully sad
Mm.
because things are changing so quickly. You need to figure out ways to pivot, to choose choices that won't deter your ability to succeed, and be okay with maybe not getting it right the first time, which is hard.
It's hard and it could be expensive, right? So
It can
we
be
keep
very
comes,
expensive.
yeah, and that's where it gets really challenging with young companies that are pre-revenue delivering these, determining their markets and their strategies because the capital spend in advance has to be acknowledged. We don't want to talk about our funding climate over the last 5 years or so. It's been crazy, but those are pieces that are very important to remember. So where are opportunities? What do you think our tailwinds are? What's gonna push us through here and go next level?
Well, I think that in the last 6 months, imagine how crazy it's been from a announcement perspective with all the different areas that have advanced in AI and other technologies. We're going to see automation in places we never thought it would be. We're going to see humans coming out of that loop in many places. And so I think that from a technology perspective, we're way ahead just in the last year. However, we need to remember that the technology is the easy part, right? And so all those other aspects will come into play. But I think the tech's there, the sky's the limit. I also think that in 2025, consumers, technologists, healthcare systems, device manufacturers, everyone's ready to move forward. Everyone sees the opportunities and they're open. However, you have to still deal with the fact that there's traditionalists in every segment and there's ways of doing things that will have to be broken down in a lot of ways. And that causes friction and time.
Mm.
So I think there's lots of great opportunities in healthcare and life sciences, medtech, device. This is where the funding is compared to other markets, and this is where it will continue to grow. I don't see healthcare and health tech decreasing in market value at all, but I do know that we're still consolidating and that the funding is becoming more conservative in a lot of ways. So it's not that's not growing, it's just everyone's being very selective.
Yeah, and we do not want to sleep on the amount of investment coming over from tech because the last year we've seen a historic investment and historic swing in those that have historically only been interested in
Mhm.
tech-driven products getting not just a little invested, largely invested in powerful, powerful organizations within the healthcare sector. And we've followed cancer and the AI detection and diagnoses and how that's been influential, but it's really, really interesting to see what else we're seeing now from a diagnostic capability, from a predictive health perspective, from a customization perspective and treatment specificity. That is a huge opportunity that I'm excited about, both as a human as well as a business person, and being able to see these trends and go. Like you said, I think we're more open and more resourceful than we have been historically, and that could be a real, a significant opportunity for all of us.
I think you're right. I
Yeah.
do.
What about globally? We are in the U.S. and there are healthcare concerns everywhere, and it is a situation where depending on where you live and depending on what condition you have, you may have the worst care, you may have the best care. You mentioned quite a bit about remote health and getting away from the tools themselves. How effective and how much do you see remote healthcare from a telehealth perspective and from a virtual perspective, being able to benefit these arrangements and cross borders in a way that could be meaningful?
So right now in the United States, as an example to start with, I know there's an MRI machine 15 minutes from here. In other places, that's not the case. There may be no MRI machine for hundreds of miles or more. And so when we think about how to give people care, I think we take for granted the fact that in some places there is no care. Here, people are probably not getting the best care they could, but the alternative in a lot of places is no care at all. And so when we think about how we could kind of go past those brick and mortar opportunities and instead hit folks where they are, there's definitely, I'd say, some hiccups and barriers, definitely around broadband access. There's lots of countries that have gone to satellite first as opposed to putting in lines. And we have to make sure that we can handle that. So it might mean that a video telemedicine visit is not actually the best modality there. Maybe it's via text, and maybe that works best. And so trying to understand what is accessible, what people can do, how they could be seen with quotation marks, whether it's over the phone or whether it's in a mobile unit. I think we need to think outside the box there because whether we like it or not, the world is a global workforce. And as we move forward, our aging population everywhere is impacting us in different ways. So we're going to have to find ways to go across all sorts of different borders to take care of each other. And so I think in some of these environments where they may not have, as I said, the MRI machines or equivalents, there's different ways we can keep the populations healthy and happy and doing the things that they need to do for their economies that will actually help everyone globally.
Hmm. So if you were to kind of project out, and this is idealistic, doesn't have to be what you expect. Let's go what you hope for. 5 years out, how would you describe healthcare? And then I'd love the same answer, 10, 15 years out.
It's a very difficult question because just in the last 6 months, so much has changed that I think it's sometimes difficult even to think 2 years out. And so when we think about healthcare in the next 5 years, it's my hope that will improve access. It won't be perfect, but I think that there'll be dramatic incremental change. I also think that it'll be more of a mindset. If we think about the cultural difference in the United States of what primary care is and the cultural significance of primary care in European countries, it's a different area of priority for the entire society. And so perhaps there's ways that we can improve that access and then consider how these societies will improve their workforces, improve their economies, and do those things that they know are important. And it might be that one of the barriers they have to cross is keeping everyone healthy.
Hmm. Interesting. And this is a question that's prompted by your answer. Do you believe that we would be better off if we had a more socialized environment as opposed to where we're at now in terms of access to healthcare?
So that's an interesting question and highly politicized, of course. But what I'd say is that I'm sure in some instances it would help. But I think that in others, maybe it wouldn't. And I say that only because it really depends on how that socialized medicine system was built out.
Hmm.
There's still huge problems in the UK around wait lists, as an example.
Hmm.
And so I don't think any system today is perfect. I think there's pros and cons of each one, and how it's set up for the population that it's serving really matters. So I can't say in a blanket statement, but I think there's definitely positives from more of a single payer system. And there's definitely things that aren't perfect too.
Well, hopefully, if we look at the perhaps 5 years out, we'll have learned a lot from each other, from these different modalities and what works and what doesn't, and what's funding it. What drives the ecosystem in a socialized setup versus ours, that can be a huge differentiator in what actually ends up happening, because capital matters. Let's face it. So yeah, no, I can see that being a really interesting study to watch. So we talked a bit about the playbook that you suggest, and some of the things that you have to think about. What else would you like to share with the audience about this upcoming book that you think is meaningful and important, that you walked away with and thought, man, that's good stuff? What were some of your takeaways?
I think that a lot of folks just haven't really considered people that are really not like them. I get to see patients all the time that live in tough conditions that are seeing me because they have no insurance. And it's a very humbling experience. And so I think, especially those of us who are killing it in the tech sector, we have to remember that there's people out there that are not like us, that have different life circumstances and situations. And I think that those problems may not be something we think about every day. So I think it's really about considering the full system and a population that you may not necessarily be a part of, and how that may differ, and therefore may change the way you build things, may change the solutions you bring to bear, may change your commercialization plans for how you're going to improve implementation and adoption.
Yeah, and it's such a great point because, like you said earlier, we we have the technology, or we can create the technology. The technology is the easy part in the big picture.
In the
It
big
has its
picture.
hurdles, but if you have the ability to do it, which we do now, to do so much with technology, utilizing it in a meaningful way as you see these challenges and as you understand and have the empathy with the individuals that aren't like you and your target audience, the people that you really want to help, that can make all the difference in the world.
I
So,
agree. I
yeah.
absolutely agree.
So when do we get to see this book drop? Is it coming out anytime soon?
So it's officially launching in December. My publisher is Wiley. But you're going to see lots of content from me all over the place because I'm very passionate about this space. Absolutely. And I advise lots of startups and work with lots of organizations all over the world. And so the 5 pillars of healthcare access are out there. I'm looking forward to seeing folks when I'm at conferences and on stage and also in their corporate boardrooms. So everyone can check me out on my website, and I look forward to teaching people more.
It's fantastic because knowing you as a leader in the industry, in the med tech sector, and bringing your tech expertise, you have a wealth of information and a wealth of experience that can share such incredible nuggets with those who are more focused on one segment of their subject matter expertise, and weaving that together to help tell a more complete story. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be great. So keep an eye out. It'll be dropping in December. We'll make sure to let our audience know. What do you think? Since you've been through this experience now, do you think there'll be another book, whether a sequel or something else?
Absolutely. I've really enjoyed the process. And I'd say that the interviews have been the most interesting and exciting part of it, but also the intense research. I love good data, and I've read so many hundreds and hundreds of papers over the last writing period that I feel like I've gotten even smarter. I mean, it's been a wonderful experience for me too, just as an author.
Fantastic. It's never the outcome. It's the process getting there, right? It's the
Yes,
journey. So
exactly.
wonderful. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. How can we get in contact with you? What would you like to share with the audience about perhaps linking in with you or emailing you? Do you have a website?
I do. So my main platform is LinkedIn. Check me out there. And then my website is drsarahmatt.com. And you can find out information about me, my book, and, my contact information so you can have me out to your place too.
Her weekly posts on LinkedIn are fantastic and ones that you have to follow. Very interesting, entertaining too, which is good because all of us have very short attention spans these days. So it's important to
Yes, we
be
do.
entertaining and educational. Well, thank you again for joining us. We look forward to seeing this book in December and reading it. And I definitely look forward to a follow up to hear how successful it's been and what's going to be on for your next read.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Holly.
And thanks to our audience for joining us today here at 160 Studios. I'm Holly Scott.